Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. I am Patty Goodwin, she, her, and leading worship with me today are Charlie Corso, he, him, and Theo Munson, she, her, Jack Cunningham, he, him, providing tech support, and Lisa Gwinner, she, her, and Karen LeBrock, she, her, for our online ministry team. Today, we are joined by Reverend Dr. Richard Gilbert as our guest speaker. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitor's form that can be found in the chat for our folks online, and that can be found in your pews for folks in person. Please fill out the form so we can offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. We offer a UU and U session on the third Sunday of every month following the service in the back of the sanctuary and online. The next UU and U is on March 19th. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor, let us take a moment to turn towards the camera and to greet our online worshiping community. Please offer a wave. If you are online, please pop into the chat to offer a greeting and to share your joys and sorrows. If you are here at First Universalist, let us take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting. Today, we are going to be singing a hymn. Today, we are going to be singing a hymn that is not very familiar to us. It is number 1057, Go Lift It Up. Theo is going to play it through once so we get a sound of what it is like, and the words will be on the screen. A hymn we sing together that has always moved me is Just As Long As I Have Breath. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I've made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they asked what I did best, tell them I said yes to love. In Jojo Moyes' book, Me Before You, the main character cares for a man who, in the prime of his life, became a quadriplegic. As she cares for him, she begins to have feelings for him. He makes the decision to travel to a place where he can choose to end his life. His family expects her to talk him out of his decision. She instead holds his hand as he takes his last breath because he did not want to continue existing, not living. When my husband George woke up from a coma, he said he wanted to go home, and if he could not go home, it was enough. I knew at that moment he meant going home figuratively. I knew that if he survived, he would not be living the life he would have wanted, but just existing. So at that moment, I started saying no. No to intubation, no to dialysis, no. When I was called to Highland Hospital at 5 a.m., I sat and held his hand as they administered morphine, and his breathing gradually slowed and finally stopped. Sometimes saying yes to life and yes to love means saying no to what is not life. And that can be the most loving thing we can do when we love someone. Come, let us worship together in love. As Connie Valk lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light a chalice in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall go into harmony with the source and meaning in life, thus to be covenant with each other and with all. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue. When I went to my sewing room in the basement to get a tablet to write my words for this morning, I found this pad on the cutting table. I realized my granddaughter Aitana had drawn hearts on it because she wanted to make a heart pillow. As I composed my words, I realized I was writing in the hearts I thought how fitting that I should write the words for today's service. How many churches would welcome the words of this topic? How lucky am I that I belong to such a church whose congregation would listen to these words through hearts of love. You are invited to give online by scanning the QR code in your pews or to drop an offering in the offering basket. For folks online, please click the link to the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. Today's story, The 10th Good Thing About Barney, is going to be a video on the screen.
The 10th Good Thing About Barney, written by Judith Vjorst. My cat Barney died last Friday. I was very sad. I cried, and I didn't watch television. I cried, and I didn't eat my chicken or even the chocolate pudding. I went to bed, and I cried. My mother sat down on my bed, and she gave me a hug. She said we could have a funeral for Barney in the morning. She said I should think of 10 good things about Barney so I could tell them at the funeral. I thought and I thought and I thought of good things about Barney. I thought of 9 good things, then I fell asleep. In the morning, my mother wrapped Barney in a yellow scarf. My father buried Barney in the ground by a tree in the yard. Annie, my friend from next door, came over with flowers, and I told good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I just count 9. I said I would try to think of another one later. At the end of the funeral, we sang a song for Barney. We couldn't remember any cat songs, so we sang one about a pussy willow. Even my father knew the words. Then Annie and I went into the kitchen with Mother. She gave us orangeade and butter cookies, and she left the box on the table so we could have seconds. I gave my seconds to Annie. "I miss Barney," I said. Annie said Barney was in heaven with lots of cats and angels, drinking cream and eating cans of tuna. I said Barney was in the ground. "Heaven," said Annie, "heaven. So there. The ground," I told her, "the ground. You don't know anything." My father came in from the yard and took a cookie. Big-mouthed Annie said heaven again. I said ground. "Tell her who's right," I asked Father. "She doesn't know anything." "Maybe Barney's in heaven," my father began. "Aha," said Annie, and stuck her tongue out at me. "And maybe," said my father, "Barney isn't." "What did I tell you?" I said, and yanked Annie's braid. Father made me let go. "We don't know too much about heaven," he told Annie. "We can't be absolutely sure that it's there." "But if it's there," said Annie in her absolutely sure voice, "it's bound to have room for Barney and tuna and cream." She finished another cookie and went back home. My father told me he had to work in the garden. I said that I would help, but only a little. I told him I didn't like it that Barney was dead. He said, "Why should I like it? It's sad," he said. He told me that it might not feel so sad tomorrow. My father had a packet of little brown seeds. He shook some out on his hand. "The ground will give them food and a place to live," he said, "and soon they'll grow a stem and some leaves and flowers." I squeezed the packet open and looked down to the bottom. I told him, "I don't see leaves and I don't see flowers." "Things change in the ground," said my father. "In the ground, everything changes." "Will Barney change too?" I asked him. "Oh yes," said my father. "He'll change until he's part of the ground and the garden." And then I asked, "Will he help to make flowers and leaves?" "He will," said my father. "He'll help grow the flowers and he'll help grow that tree and some grass. You know," he said, "that's a pretty nice job for a cat." My father and I planted all of the seeds in the garden. Mother made sandwiches, and we ate them under the tree. After lunch, we worked in the garden some more. At night, I still didn't want to watch any television. When I turned out the light, my mother sat down on my bed. She gave me a hug, and I said I had something to tell her. "Listen," I said, and I told the good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean. Also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. "Those are all good things," said my mother, "but I still just count 9. "Yes," I said, "but now I have another. Barney is in the ground, and he is helping grow flowers." "You know," I said, "that's a pretty nice job for a cat."
I invite you into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place a hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As we place stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat that we may hear from the community gathered here. A sorrow from Pat Stott. Roland Baumlett, one of the co-authors of Reaching for the Infinite, A History of First Universalist, died on February 16th, 2023. Holding in our hearts all who knew Roland, and holding his profound contribution to the histories being told about this community. I have a special joy about him. One Sunday after I had done the entire service, Roland walked up to me and said, "I don't know if you want to be a minister, but if you want to be, you could." I will never forget that. Sorrow. Yesterday was my beloved son Brian's birthday. He would have been 55. I'm not sure who said that. Who? Okay. All right. Concern, we need help finding respite care for my sister who takes care of my brother-in-law. He is a retired administrative law judge and public defender. See Lisa Barr at Coffee Hour with ideas, please. Katie Forbush, a joy. Attending the Love and Justice 2 event, amazing fundraiser for the Franklin Florence Civil Right Heritage Park. Connie Vaughn, joy. The multi-generational potluck and game night was a rousing success. Children and adults had a great evening Friday. Lois Baum, a joy. Oh, my dad died 10 years ago. I guess it's a love. My dad died 15 years ago today. I so wish you all could have known him, a man of compassion for all. We will drop one stone into the bowl for all the joys shared by our online community. We will drop one stone to represent all of the sorrows shared by our online community. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love.
I greet you from this side of the pulpit today, but next Sunday, I will be with you in the pews. I invite you now to settle down in your pews or in your chairs at home. Take a deep breath. In these days, we need to take a deep breath together. Settle down and please join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. For all that is good in the world, we make thanksgiving. For the beauty of the earth, we sing praises. For the joy of human companionship, we say amen. For the abundance of creation, we give gratitude. For the blessings of being, we are grateful. In the serenity of this hour and the sanctity of this space, we gaze upon life not with rose-colored glasses, but with a heartfelt appreciation for all that is good. While the world surrounding us seems often in the grip of evil, we remember the good which graces our every day. When greed and avarice appear to rule humanity, we recall the generosity of others. Where pessimism about our predicament holds sway, we conjure up an image of possibility. It is no false confidence that we seek, for we know and experience quiet courage everywhere. It is no naive optimism we would exhibit, for we experience the devotion of those fired by hope. In the gratitude of this holy hour, we remind ourselves of all the good in the world and are glad. I invite you now to a period of meditation to ponder these words. Our hymn of contemplation, By the Waters of Babylon, number 279. We'll sing it through 2 times. And I think Thea will play it through first to remind us of the notes. I especially need this. A not so funny thing happened to me on the way to this sermon. Cruising along as a relatively healthy 86-year-old who was quite active, alternating brisk walking with weightlifting, I harbored delusions that I was on track for 100 without any question. And then, seemingly all of a sudden, out of the blue, came a little upset with my heart. My heart began to do strange things, and I have been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, apparently common for folks of my age. But who, me, a former athlete, a disciplined exerciser, and a 35-year vegetarian to boot? Yes, me. And I'm swift to say the experience of a treadmill test greatly concentrates the mind on matters of life and death. I hadn't planned quite so personal an introduction to this sermon, but sometimes life gets in the way of the best laid plans of mice, men, and ministers. Hence, my interest in medical aid in dying is far from a merely social issue. It has become very personal. The Medical Aid in Dying Bill, MAID, MAID, is now before the New York State Legislature and enables a mentally capable adult with a prognosis of 6 months or less to live to request, to obtain, and to take medication that brings about a peaceful death. Terminally ill patients and persons are the subjects of their dying, not merely the objects of medical technology or arbitrary rules. Ultimate decisions are left to the individual in consultation with medical counselors, family, and friends. And because I'm always programmatic in my sermons, there are copies of the bill over there, summaries of the bill over there. and I hope you will take one with you as you leave. Medical aid in dying has long been important to Unitarian Universalists. Our denomination at its General Assembly in 1988 passed a resolution affirming medical aid in dying. 1988. Copies, again, over there. In April of 2017, as I testified before the New York State Assembly Health Committee, I pointed out the persuasion of the Unitarian Universalists, as well as many other religious groups. I am a member of the Clergy Consultation Board, Compassionate Choices of New York. Now, to be sure, this issue is controversial, but its chances this year are promising. It is an idea whose time has come. In the process of advocating for this legislation, I have had to come face to face with my own finitude. And so a few reflections on what I have learned from preaching, pastoring, and politics. After all, religion is about living and dying and the space between. Is it possible that reflecting on death gives us insight into life? I once read about a 5-year-old girl explaining death to her 4-year-old sister. And I quote, "Death is nothing to be afraid of," she said. "It is just as if you were invited somewhere and it is getting late and you go to the hostess and you say, 'Thank you for the wonderful party. I really enjoyed myself, but now it is time to go home.'" A 5-year-old. This morning's story, The 10th Good Thing About Barney, is another way of expressing life and death to people of all ages. One of our basic religious tasks is learning to die with dignity, knowing when it is time to go home and how we get from here to there. I sometimes fantasize about my own demise. One last glorious run on the ski slopes, a triple diamond slope, plunging down for one last hurrah on my 100th birthday. Other times I think of a profoundly quiet death, sharing my final pearls of wisdom to an expectant circle of friends and family on the shores of Seneca Lake at sunset, precisely at sunset. One of my seminary classmates actually died in the pulpit, but I don't want to be quite so dramatic this time. But what song would I choose for my closing hymn? When the Saints Go Marching In, or Amazing Grace? I'm still working on that one. Ultimately, we come to realize that we are merely guests of existence. We're all temps in the eternal scheme of things. A flash of the firefly in the night, an infinitesimal blink of the cosmic eye, a meteor that flashes across the heavens and disappears. However, we are a cosmic speck that can think and feel and wonder. Robert Ardrey catches up my mysticism in the book, The Territorial Imperative. We partake of time and death and the space between the stars. We matter. Our life counts, as does our death. At my age, I am counting the years rather slowly, as time seems to accelerate at this time of life. One of my retirement projects is archiving 60 plus years of sermons, talks, books, commentaries as a gift to my sons who are right here. So remember well. I have envisioned giving them all of this on a flash drive. On a flash drive, summing up my work as a minister in words. Perusing all those sermons and so on has been, I confess, a fascinating life review. But I confess, it is very humbling to think that everything I have said over all these years can be reduced to a single thumb drive. At least it won't take up much room. How do I want to end? How do I want to die? Not that I will be exactly in charge of every detail. Unitarian Universalists, we tend to be control freaks. We want to be in total command of our lives. Autonomy, self-determination, moral agency are important values, as they should be. We stand in a long line of people who agree. Plato thought philosophy was training or dying. Socrates drank the hemlock in the company of good friends. It was the custom on the Isle of Cos, birthplace of Hippocrates, for the very old to gather annually as if for a banquet and leave the world by together drinking a fatal potion. Elderly Eskimos who felt themselves to be a burden upon their communities went to meet their maker on a remote ice floe. Native Americans embraced a simple ritual with a barren hilltop replacing the ice floe. Then there is a more modern tradition of holding a celebration of life while the person to be celebrated is still alive and can enjoy the panorama of their lives. Remember Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Maury? Albom spent many hours with his college professor, Maury Schwartz, and they covered a great deal of territory about life and death. And so while Schwartz was still alive, they had a tribute gathering. And it was well described in this book. I attended a similar event for a friend of mine some years ago, and I thought it was magnificent. And I think he did too. I recall two instances of right to die issues in Rochester. Dr. John Cry, a mostly retired physician, injected life-ending drugs into a nursing home patient and a longtime friend by the friend's request. The man had advanced stage Alzheimer's. A nurse observed the procedure, reported it to the authorities, and the district attorney charged Cry with mercy killing. Before the case played out, Dr. Cry committed suicide in his garage. A real tragedy. In the second instance, Dr. Timothy Quill, he placed an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which plunged our community into a debate on what was inaccurately called physician-assisted suicide. Tim, a friend, a member of First Unitarian Church, and a well-known palliative care physician, wanted to confront the public with the hard issue of terminal suffering, and he did. He described his treatment of Diane, 45, longtime patient, who refused treatment for leukemia with a 1 in 4 chance of success. Together, doctor, patient, and family examined the available alternatives. At her request, Tim provided her with medications and instructions on how to use them. She spent the next few weeks saying goodbye to family and friends. She took the fatal dosage and died peacefully on her living room couch. Editorial pages exploded with indignation, some praising Quill's courage and some condemning him for playing God. A Christian anti-abortion group called for his arrest and boycotted the hospital where he practiced. The case was ultimately dismissed by the grand jury, and Tim brought this case to the New York courts, but they found no constitutional right to this kind of death with dignity. Now retired, Tim articulates a continuum of treatment for terminally ill persons, from pain management to palliative care, to hospice, to medical aid in dying. He and I were both at a press conference on this topic some months ago in the Clara Barton Lounge. Now, briefly, what are the moral questions? First of all, is this not physician-assisted suicide? No. Suicide is an act of despair. Medical aid in dying is an act of meaning. And then, will we control our technology or be controlled by it? We can now prolong our lives by medical technology, but ought we do everything we are capable of doing to sustain mere biological life? In a desperate defiance of death, a kind of medicated survival, and many of us probably personally have seen this. The tyranny of technology often simply prolongs human suffering. What does reverence for life really mean? I find there's no inherent virtue in longevity, nor in what our Roman Catholic friends call the mystical beauty of pain. Life has to do with growing a soul, loving and being loved, and helping to repair a broken world, my mantra. The body should be the temple of the soul and not its prison. Well, what about human freedom? Who is to decide for another human being that they are condemned to endless suffering? Our moral imperative is not just to live, but to live with some kind of style, to thrive, the good life. No religious group has the right to deny that freedom to others. Well, what about the slippery slope moral argument that if we allow medical aid in dying, it will so pollute the moral atmosphere that even those with disabilities will be affected? One disability rights group, Not Dead Yet, I know them well, has been a constant presence at our programs on medical aid in dying. However, other disability rights very much affirm it. And there is no evidence of this slippery slope argument in the nearly quarter of a century in which we have had medical aid in dying laws in the United States. But there are other, and to me, more persuasive reasons for medical aid in dying. People. I think of Margaret, my 95-year-old grandmother, curled up in a fetal position, crying like a baby. And we, my mother, my aunts, had to slowly watch her suffer and die. I think of Louis, a member of First Unitarian Church and the first conscientious objector in the Rochester area in World War II, facing inevitable death. He starved himself to death in his living room. I can remember visiting him as his wife moistened his lips, but he refused anything but little sips of water. It's a very painful way to die, as Tim Quill says. And you may recall the story of the former NPR radio host Diane Rehm, whose husband also starved himself to death because there was no alternative. Now Diane is a very strong supporter of MAID, M-A-I-D. I think of Jim, who shot himself, of Roy and Doreen, who took their own lives as an alternative to long and endless suffering. I recall my late colleague, Jan, who took her minister husband to Dr. Jack Kevorkian for deliverance. And despite his reputation as Dr. Death, and I certainly would not recommend that way to go, Jan said she and her husband found that he was extremely compassionate and kind. I have corresponded with Jeff, a ministerial colleague who's doing his PhD thesis on medical aid in dying in Toronto. As a hospital chaplain in Canada, he has been involved in 6 cases of medical aid in dying. Sadly, one was not professional. Kate, his wife, he wrote, chose it at the end of an incredibly debilitating struggle in April. Her endurance with acute leukemia just became too much. And finally, I think of another friend and colleague, Judy, who moved from Pennsylvania to Oregon because Oregon had a medical aid in dying law. She and her minister husband moved there. I knew them well. She had 2 goals: to live, to celebrate her 77th birthday, which she did on September 4th, 2020. And her second goal was to vote in that election. But she could not make it that long. She entered hospice. The morning she chose to die, Judy, still very much alive, wrote 15 letters to voters in Pennsylvania, urging them to go to the polls and vote the right way. Judy lived a full life to the very end and died a dignified death. Of course, such decisions are painful, excruciatingly painful. There are no moral algorithms for calculating action. As people of faith, we understand death as part of the life process. Sometimes death is friend, not enemy. Our last right as a human being is the right to die with dignity. Woody Allen, in one of his better days many years ago, wrote that he wasn't afraid of death, he just didn't want to be there when it happened. However, I do. However, I refused to despair of death. We live in the mystery of life and death. We do what we can. We give what we can give. We live as we are able. If we cannot unravel the riddle of life, and I suspect we cannot completely, certainly, we can learn to live with it and enjoy it. Death is not punishment, not a cruel fate from which we need rescue by the supernatural, but it is a part and parcel of life, a natural and necessary part. As the poet George Santayana once said, there is no cure for birth or death except to enjoy the interval. We're all just visitors, guests of existence. What can we do but live and enjoy that blessed visit as grateful and gracious guests? What can we do with time and death and the space between the stars but to enjoy the interval we are among? In the immortal words of Mark Twain, so live that when you come to die, even the undertaker will be sad. And so my recalcitrant ticker reminds me of my finitude. I hope it keeps going for a good many more ticks. But hey, we're all terminal, just penciled in. However, as that wise soul from the Native American tradition, speaking of life, put it so well, the wonder is that it has happened at all. The wonder is that it has happened at all. Amen. Our closing hymn, we laugh, we cry, chosen especially because Joyce and I knew the beautiful young woman who died before her time, but wrote this glorious hymn to life and death. Number 354. Please share the words written on your program and on the screens as we extinguish our chalice for another week. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with this message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. And then taking up Lane's tradition to look around you, see those people who are with you on the journey. And then consider these closing words. Between the rising of the curtain birth and the falling of the curtain death, there is the play, both precious and precarious, of smiles through tears, of loves loved and lost, of death in life and life despite death, between the expectant hush of the audience at curtain time and its burst of acclaim or disapproval at play's end. We cavort back and forth across the stage, now in the glow of the footlights, now in the shadows behind the curtains. All we can be sure of is that the curtain for us has risen, and just as surely one day will fall. May the play be worthy of applause. Amen.